Konami started doing mega tins for Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in 2014, and it was a pretty big deal. Those tins reprinted many of the best cards from the past year and introduced a bunch of cool promos into the game. In the early days, they were just promos with different rarities. Later on, they started importing OCG cards as promos, but in today's video, I want to talk about the 2019 Gold Sarcophagus tin because I really feel like this was a huge shift for mega tins in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I know this isn't technically a mega tin per se in title, but it is a tin and it does include mega packs, and pretty much all of the community refers to it as the 2019 mega tin. This is also the second year in a row where I have done my birthday tradition where I make a video and don't really worry about how many views it gets or how many clicks it gets, but rather just focus on a video that I really want to talk about because I feel like it needs to be discussed. It's not that I don't enjoy my regular discussion content, it's just that there's only so much time in the day, only so many videos that I can realistically make, so the ones that might only appeal to a smaller audience sometimes get pushed aside. Anyway, the 2019 Gold Sarcophagus tin was released at the end of August of 2019. Now this tin had a ton of hype, as do all of the mega tins, but this one was really special. First off, it was the very first time that Konami had not released two mega tins next to each other. It was just one of them, and also it was the first time that the promo cards were not guaranteed out of every single tin. Now for some players they didn't like this, but I think the majority of players really did enjoy that you had a sort of surprise element when you opened the tins, because it made it a little bit more interesting when you opened multiple instead of just getting these same promo cards every single time. The promotional pack that was included in these tins had 3 different categories of cards to make up for 5 total promotional prismatic secret rares. Of the 5 promotional cards, 2 of them were cards with art from Kazuki Takahashi that were imported from the OCG, 2 of them were cards that were iconic in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series, and the final card was a world premiere card that Konami had hyped up for quite a while. We're gonna go back and review every single one of the promo cards, but first let's talk about the mega packs themselves. The mega packs had 16 cards. They had 12 commons, 1 rare, 1 super, 1 ultra, and 1 prismatic secret rare. Now this was not the first time that we ever saw prismatic secret rares in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. We saw them throughout history. We also saw an entire set around them with World Superstars, but for many players out there, I think this was the first time that they ever interacted with a prismatic secret rare. And I think that most of the community agrees that these are really nice looking cards. No matter what card you seem to put prismatic secret rare on, the colors, I mean, just really seem to pop. The artwork really stands out. This is one of my favorite rarities in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it is severely underutilized. Luckily, Konami has announced that they are bringing prismatic secret rares back for the 2020 mega tins, but that's another discussion for another day. The big selling point of these mega packs though, compared to other years, is that for the very first time the cards that were reprinted were no longer printed in the same rarity as their original release. You see, for all the other mega tins, when you had a secret rare reprint, it was previously printed as a secret rare. Now this is fine, I guess, and it does make the card's price go way down, but this time Konami really switched things up, and I think it did a lot of good. Basically, many of the lower rarity cards got upgraded into higher rarities, and many of the higher rarity cards got lowered into lower rarities. Now why does this matter? Well, it matters because it means budget players have an easier time picking up their higher rarity cards because now they're lower rarities, and players that want to make their decks even more max rarity can now pick up higher rarity versions of cards that previously weren't released in those rarities. There were so many great choices here. You have the Incantations and Crusadia monsters all getting their first holographic prints, which was really cool. The choices for prismatic secret rares were perfect as well. You had Nightmare Mermaid and Salamangreat Foxy and Thunder Dragon monsters and Altergeist Multifaker and Called by the Grave and Red Reboot and even the Sky Striker Link monsters. There are so many meta relevant and fan favorite choices for prismatic secret rares. Also, the higher rarity and expensive danger monsters decreased in rarity while the lower rarity ones increased in rarity to match the original releases of the other danger monsters. And also the Cyber Dragon stuff and Borrelsword Dragon actually decreased in rarity to decrease their price and make them more budget friendly. Overall, this was a great decision. You saw so many good choices on Konami's side. Not every single card in the set was changed as far as their rarity goes, but many of the most important ones were, which is something to celebrate. Okay, now that we've talked about the mega packs, we can talk about the promo promo cards and sort of talk about how good or bad each one was. First off, you had the 6 new cards that were all drawn by Kazuki Takahashi. These were all imported from the OCG, and you have some hits and some misses. These were mostly included as just fan favorite pulls, and I think that people really appreciated these cards being included, especially because they were Prismatic Secret Rares. The first one was Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. Now, I made an entire video about this card when it was first revealed in the OCG, but I really do feel like this was one of the best choices in this set. I think it is one of the better promos. The artwork is really good. I mean, all of these cards have that, but it's really, really cool looking. The effect is actually pretty relevant, and it's a huge step up from the previous Ultimate Dragon, obviously, but also it did see a little bit of competitive success with Waking the Dragon. It is a really good Waking the Dragon monster to special summon. That being said, did this one release make Blue Eyes a meta-relevant strategy once again? I mean, no, but it is still a pretty cool card, and I think a lot of people were excited to pull it. You also had Magician of Black Chaos Max, a card that is actually significantly worse than Chaos Max Dragon, believe it or not, even though that card is also not very good. There were a few discussions about this card when it was first revealed, but once again, not really that competitively viable. Although, of course, with these particular promo cards, that wasn't really the point. Exodia, the Legendary Defender, is pretty bad. I mean, it's really, really bad. This is one of the worst promos in this entire set. It probably goes without saying here, but this artwork is really, really awesome. I think that it is a really unique take on Exodia, and it has a new color palette, but still, yeah, this is probably one of the weaker promos in this entire tin. Oracle Mana actually did see play with Magician Souls in a variety of decks, so by default, it's the most competitively viable out of all 6 of the special artwork cards in this tin. Its effect is not super relevant, but it was a level 6 spellcaster card that actually did come in handy in some cases when you drew it instead of sending it with Magician Souls. So yeah, it was played as a Garnet, but it was played in successful decks, so this is one of the better promos, although it was only good pretty recently when Magician Souls actually was released. It wasn't very good when it first came out. Red Eyes Alternative Black Dragon only further confirmed how much Konami prefers Blue Eyes players over Red Eyes players. Yeah, if you compare this thing to Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon, which was released many years ago, I mean, this thing is just laughably worse than that card, and it's way newer. Yes, Alternative Black Dragon has cool artwork. Do I have to keep saying that? I mean, obviously these cards all look fantastic, and I think that being a Prismatic Secret Rare really does make the darker purples and reds and maroons really stand out. Neo Kaiser Glider is probably the most forgettable of all of these promo cards. It's by far the least interesting. Kaiser Glider is not nearly as iconic as things like Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon or Red Eyes Black Dragon, so compared to the other promo card starting points, this one's already off to a pretty bad start, not to mention the effect on this card, Neo Kaiser Glider, is pretty bad. So yeah, this is probably the worst one of all these 6 artwork promo cards. So you would get 2 of those, which was pretty cool, and then you would get 2 of these iconic reprints from the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. All 3 of the Egyptian god cards were possible promos, and they had their really interesting alternate artworks. I'm a huge fan of all of these. That Slifer artwork is actually one of my favorites of all of the Egyptian god card artworks, and getting them in Prismatic Secret Rare was a nice bonus. You also had Regeki and Monster Reborn, and I'm really glad that they didn't go with Blue Eyes and Dark Magician. Those cards have been reprinted in so many different sets and so many different rarities. Printing Regeki and Monster Reborn was a really cool idea. Monster Reborn in particular does still see some play even to this day. Regeki not so much, but especially because I know that Megatins are popular even with ex-Yu-Gi-Oh players. These are pretty cool promos for that demographic, and I would imagine that some of those players actually did start up Yu-Gi-Oh once again after buying this tin. The last promo that you would pull in your tin would be out of one of the new 3 world premiere cards in this set, and like I said, Konami had given us a little information about these cards and people were pretty excited. All 3 of these cards saw competitive play in different strategies. These cards actually did change the meta for the better. I think a lot of players really enjoyed their release, and these are cards that Konami, like I said, did hype up, and for a good reason. They are extremely powerful anti-meta tools. First, you had Dimension Shifter, which is like a macro Cosmos hand trap. This thing was probably the least successful out of all of these 3 promo cards, but it still saw play in decks like Thunder Dragons and sometimes other strategies as well. And then of course you had Niburu, which was probably the most hyped card out of the entire tin, even more so than the reprints. This was the card of the 2019 Gold Sarcophagus tins, and this thing did make a huge impact and continues to do so even to this day. I think that Nibiru's design is great. I think it's really cool how it encourages you to not have a board when you activate it, because there are plenty of other really strong hand traps, even banned ones like Max C, where they're also good if you have an established board. So if you draw them going first, you can still use them. With Nibiru though, if you went first and made a huge board, well, now the card is a lot worse. It does have sort of a skill element of, well, how much do I care about preventing my opponent's plays and how much am I willing to give up of my own field? Niburu is not always a perfect hand trap for every single metagame. It's gone up in popularity and down in popularity. It's changed all over the place, but I think it's very important to have in Yu-Gi-Oh! Just in case things get too out of hand. And finally, Dark Ruler No More. This is a great going second option against decks that focus too heavily on monster cards. This is something that a lot of people have complained about. You don't like playing against a board that your opponent has where they have 5 negates and they're all monsters. A lot of players don't like that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has become so monster focused. I would imagine that this was the design philosophy behind Mystic Mine, but that went way too overboard. Dark Ruler No More still requires you to break your opponent's board using your other cards, and also you can't OTK your opponent, which means that you only really have that one turn as an opportunity if your opponent invested too much in monsters only. I think Dark Ruler No More will continue to see play for many years. It is a very good going second option, as are all of the 3 new world premiere cards. The 2019 Megatins had great reprints, they had great OCG imports, they had great world premiere cards, and it sort of took advantage of a really cool rarity that we don't usually see in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is one of the best products that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever released, and I really do mean that. This is pretty much a great product for every single type of player, and that is really difficult to do, especially with a card game as big as Yu-Gi-Oh! We're about a month away from the 2020 Megatin, which is pretty exciting, and they have made some different decisions with that tin compared to this one. For example, there are no promo cards in that tin, which is a really weird decision in my opinion, but I'm gonna hold off judgment until the tin actually gets released, because even without promo cards, it could still be a great Megatin. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching today's discussion video. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.